This is PVP Television News.
This is a new initiative for us. We haven't done it before. I've just been in Bilthwells doing exactly the same sort of meeting down there. This is the opportunity for everyone to have a say what you wish about where you think Wales is going at the moment, local issues, local policies, because obviously we had a great deal of success in the local government elections, getting a lot of Conservative councillors elected. Now got a member of the Parliament and obviously of the Assembly who are Conservatives, and so the Conservatives have a huge stake here in Mid Wales, and we want to make sure it works for the people of Mid Wales. And with the exciting announcement yesterday, about a Mid Wales growth deal, building on the work that Russ has been doing advocating such a deal, there's a huge opportunity here now economically to drive forward the opportunities for businesses across the whole of Mid Wales, but in particular Montgomeryshire. But one thing I'd like to kick the meeting off, because it seems to spark a bit of discussion, it does, is the proposal for a tourism tax that is emanating from the Welsh Labour Government at the moment. And I'd really like to hear what anyone's view in this room would be about the pros and cons of such a tax. Now, as the proponents of it say, it would be great to create a fund to promote tourism here in Wales. The people who advocate against it obviously clearly say that it'll put Welsh tourism at a huge disadvantage, and when people are looking to take their annual holiday or their weekend away, they'll be looking and thinking, my God, you know, Wales is now 50 quid dearer or 100 quid dearer than I can go to the West Country or I can go to the North East. So there are two arguments. As Russ and I know, there's a consultation out at the moment, and if people believe strongly one way or the other, it's really, really important that you make your voice heard. Otherwise, the Welsh tourism industry could be faced with this tourism tax placed on it. So who wants to start the discussion off on that particular issue around a tourism tax and what you might think of that? In 2006, the Welsh Tourism Board was taken out of existence, if you like, and all that resource was brought back into Welsh Government, and there's a strong debate about whether that was a success or not. Most people I speak to say it wasn't very successful, and now you have civil servants running obviously the tourism offer here from Wales and promoting Wales as a destination. The key thing here is that what you'll suddenly find is that tourism operators here in Wales will have this extra tax placed on them that someone in Shrewsbury, in Hereford, or just across any other part of Offa's Dyke that you're in direct competition with won't have a tax placed on them. And that really is going to put the tourism industry at a huge disadvantage, I would suggest. But I'm all for listening to someone who, or many people who might have a supporting view of it as such, because there's, as I said, a real danger that the government in Cardiff Bay actually bring forward this proposal, and so someone putting their head on a pillow in a hotel or a B&B or a caravan in Mid Wales could well be paying 4, 5, 6 quid a night extra because that would be the tax that would be placed on them then. So has anyone else got a view on what they think should happen to the tourism tax? But obviously keep it quite clean because we've got a camera there we have then. But is there any other views in the room?
Yes, I'm opposed to this unless it is being taken forward at a United Kingdom level.
Well, that's a very fair point, because the one argument that is a very real argument to have is about supporting the campaign to lower VAT on tourist operators. And actually I think there's merit in having that discussion. I quite agree with that. But the one thing with VAT is it's uniformed across the United Kingdom. And so if someone's paying 20, you can argue whether 20% is the right level or not, but everyone is paying 20%. If all of a sudden you're going to be saying someone's paying 20% VAT, and then they potentially, and no rates have been set yet, but let's arbitrarily take 5%, for example, as a figure, a tourism operator here in Mid Wales or Cardiff or Swansea or North Wales could potentially add in another 5% to the bill when you check out. Well, if you're a family of 4, for example, and you're walking out to the hotel and you're thinking, where am I going to go next year for my family holiday? And you're looking and sizing the job up. If that holiday in Wales is going to cost 50 quid, 100 quid more to going to the West Country, going to the Lake District, staying in the English Midlands, if you like, then that extra 50 quid to 100 quid is going to be the difference between where you book, is it not? Because people have a budget and that's what they spend. And that's what I'd implore people in this room to really get stuck in and make their voices heard. And I know Russ is campaigning hard on it, and we from the Conservative point of view are campaigning hard as well to try and make this point that, you know, if you are going to put this tax in, you are seriously going to undermine a vital economic plank of rural Wales. and in particular the urban offer as well. I represent one of the urban constituencies in Cardiff, and so obviously that's going to put Cardiff at a disadvantage as well. And trying to get that through some of the ministers' heads is a real difficult job, because many of them have never run a business in their life. So they have no understanding of exactly how a competitive business needs to run. So is there any other views or anyone else?
Where would
Sir?
the tax go?
Well, the discussion around the tax is supposedly to raise funds to promote tourism here in Wales. And in some respects, you might think, well, I get that to a point. It might create a fund to promote tourism opportunities here in Wales. Invariably, tax, once it's set, only ever goes one way, and that's up in the first instance. And I would suggest define promotion. I mean, that can be a whole host of different opportunities that government currently funds from general taxation that suddenly would pull away from and use this fund to make up the shortfall. And I go back to the...
It's another stealth tax, isn't it?
Exactly,
Yes.
and that's the very point that I'm making, is that that's why I think it's really important that people at this stage get out there and actually engage in the consultation process. Otherwise, in 12, 18 months' time, we could be looking at tourism operators, and we're in a fine establishment here, having that at the bottom of their bills as they're making out for people, that extra Welsh tax that really will be devastating for tourist operations, not just here in Mid Wales, but in other parts of Wales as well. Then, because, as I said, just across Offers Dyke, there's not going to be a comparable tax, and there's not.
It's an extra admin job for all these small businesses, and they have enough of that anyway, enough of paperwork and working things out. Why should they have to do it?
Well, and again, that goes back to the consultation of making sure that we make these points, and if it is the consensus, it certainly was a consensus in Built Wells, that this was a really bad idea. But if there is someone in the room who thinks there's a positive strand, let's have that voice, or voices.
Well, I think, Andrew, that most people going on holiday, whether they go abroad or in this country, turn to the internet and IT. And I think that's a far better way to do it. And then the individual businesses, it's up to them then to present their own private on the internet. And it's open then, and that's cost-free, isn't it?
So from the promotional side of
Yeah.
things, you mean then?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very valid point, by and large, especially with the weekend market as such, where people take long weekends or short weekends, call them what you will. People very often on the Thursday are deciding that they're going to go away on the weekend now, because with the internet, the world's your oyster, really, isn't it? You know, you can flick on and all of a sudden you have that booking where 20, 30 years ago you'd be thinking a month or two in advance you would then. But it goes back to the point about making a competitive offer when you're up against other areas that have similar offerings, but ultimately when they give you your bill are going to be that 50 quid or 100 quid cheaper as such, and then they are. And you know, here in Mid Wales, for example, if you take agriculture and you take tourism out, you're taking two of the mainstays of the rural economy, are you not then? And whilst keeping their farms going as well then. So can I take it that there is a view within the room, in fairness, that a tourism tax here in Wales would not be a good proposition?
The people who are going to earn money out of the visitors are the tourism businesses.
No, and you make a very fair point there, sir, if I may say so. I mean, I think what you're implying almost is if businesses had confidence that a national campaign or an international campaign would benefit their businesses, they could have almost like a voluntary levy that they could then channel in at. The business might say, that's worth £5,000 to me, that is then, rather than having, by law, a tax placed at the bottom of the bill that, irrespective of the merits of whatever campaign might be put in place, you are compelled to pay into, you are then. And likewise, I go back to this point about competition and how people will, and as a father of 4 kids, I know myself, and the wife and myself look at where you're going to go for your annual holiday. You are looking at that bottom line, thinking, well, if that place is 100 quid ahead of that one, and I can't see no real difference in it, frankly, I'm going to go where I get my £100 that I can spend on the kids when we're, you know, maybe having that extra meal or whatever else, or actually saving it in the bank account as well then. So I'd take that point forward, if I may, if everyone's happy for that, and I'd invite everyone around the room, because I know Russell will be championing the cause in the Bay as well, as we've had several debates on this, and we have a petition up and running at the moment on the Facebook page. I don't profess to understand Facebook too well. I try and keep off social media, I do, because it always ends up getting you into trouble, it does. But the other thing that was really interesting in Brecon earlier on today was how many people in here have heard of the Rural Development Plan?
Yes, I remember it.
How many people have had any money out to the Rural Development Plan? No one. Because again, in Brecon, similar response, and yet the Rural Development Plan is a 7-year plan that is currently in existence now, so it's, you wouldn't need to reflect on it. It's actually with us at the moment. It runs from 2014 to 2020, 2021, I think it is. It's £920 million worth of money, a serious sum of money during that 7-year period for economic regeneration, opportunities, rural development support in rural communities, i.e. Rural Development Plan. And yet here we are in the heart of Mid Wales, and I've just asked a room full of individuals, like I did in Bilthwells, and very few people had heard of it, very few people had had any money out of it, and yet it sits there waiting to support rural communities, it does.
There was rural tourism course at one time, wasn't there?
Well, you can get money for rural tourism because obviously that's rural development it is as well then. But that is a real concern given that we're 3 years into obviously the support that package offers to rural Wales. I mean, what would people think in this room about the support that the Assembly Government gives to businesses here in Mid Wales?
Rubbish. Nothing.
Nothing.
Is there a positive voice in the room around rural support and rural development support coming from the Welsh Government?
No.
Right, we've got a clean bit of paper. What would be the 3 things that you think we need to do to support, and by we I mean the Assembly, I'm not trying to mix the 2 things up, but by the Assembly and our roles as Assembly members, we should be devising to support rural development and rural businesses. Because unless people have opportunities to have businesses in Mid Wales, what hope have you got of keeping young people here? And what hope have you got of actually having communities that thrive and having high streets that work?
Well, one thing that's we've needed for many, many years, I know we just happened to bypass in Newtown after 45 or 50 years.
Thanks to Russ's campaigning.
Yes.
Is a decent road from the M54 to Aberystwyth and north and south as well. And I think that would regenerate business.
Well, transport links was, maybe Russ would like to interject at that point then, because
I think we need better links across the border. So, like for example, in Llanymylech, a long time we have Llanymylech bypass. That's important. I don't think connecting up Wales is necessarily important because, often people say to me, talk about Cardiff Airport being for all of Wales. Well, we don't go to Cardiff Airport. Not right here. We go to Birmingham or Manchester.
I think that one of the main industries in Wales is agriculture.
Yes.
And agriculture provides a lot of jobs to a lot of people. And I think that if there's money available, it should be to support existing businesses.
Maybe the Conservative group on the County Council, along with Russell, Glyn and Chris in Brecon and Radnor, that can do to hammer the Labour government in Cardiff Bay to say, look, you've got this fund and you're not spending it on the sort of areas that it should be spent. So business startups is one thing that I'm very keen to see happen, and that's something that the RDP should do.
Well, as I said, it's 920 million in total the RDP is, and to date, well not to date, back in the summer I put some written questions in, and after nearly 3 years, 2.5, 3 years, they'd only spent 10% of that 920 million they had. Well, it's still sitting there, it's just they haven't got it out the door. So that's a real concern in that all of a sudden you start getting poor decisions being taken, and that money, and very often you're looking around businesses where, 5,000 here, 10,000 there would make a huge difference to those businesses.
But the money would be better off being part of the overall revenue support grant budget to local authorities in Wales because it's local authorities are the best place to deliver these schemes that they want to do.
Well, and that's why we've been campaigning for reduced business rates. Basically, any business up to £12,000 being taken out of business rates altogether and tapered up to £15,000. Because most businesses, if you give them a windfall, don't put it in the Swiss bank account because A, they haven't got a Swiss bank account, but B, it goes straight into investment in that business, and that investment, 9 times out of 10, either leads to more employment opportunities or safeguards those employment opportunities. But what's important, I think, with the budget yesterday was the announcement of the Mid Wales Growth Deal, and that is really the first time that government recognising, because there's 7 enterprise zones around Wales which the Welsh Government has set up, which have been pretty poor, to be honest with you, and delivered not many jobs, to be honest with you, but had £200 million worth of investment. And Russ was questioning the Minister yesterday, and it works out at £74,000 a job that the Welsh Government has spent in those enterprise zones. The one part of Wales that hasn't got an enterprise zone is Mid Wales. Full stop. You know, it is almost like the polo effect, the hole in the middle. Everything around the outside gets it, but the hole in the middle's not getting it. Now, in fairness to the UK government, they've recognised that, thanks to Glyn's lobbying and Russ's lobbying in particular, making the point that actually when you're talking about city deals, when you're talking about a North Wales growth deal, there is this piece in the middle called Mid Wales that is as entrepreneurial, aspirational as any other part of Wales and needs the opportunity. It does, and probably more so, because you have to be here to survive it, you do, don't you? So if you talk about North... Sorry, yeah, go on, sir.
Can I say that I've only been living in Mid Wales for 12 months, but our family came from Mid Wales originally. But listening to the TV and radio and whatever else, it's as if Wales stops sort of there. And you never hear about Mid Wales or North Wales. It's all to do with South Wales, Cardiff, Swansea, whatever. And we could be cut off. Wales could be cut across the middle. And that's the view I've made in the last 12 months.
Someone who's come in.
Somebody who's come in, yeah.
I mean, who would think that Mid Wales, and this might be a loaded question, but it's worth throwing it because this is a discussion night, politics and a pint, although I did get taken to task saying not everyone drinks pints, so perhaps next time we need to call it politics, Prosecco and pints, and that way then we might get there, but as I said, this is only the second one, so we're refining it all along as we go along. Who believes that Mid Wales gets a fair deal at the moment?
Nobody.
You know, there's a pretty good cross-section of people
What
here.
I'd like to ask Andrew is the fact that the Westminster government have recognised there's a hole in Mid Wales. Why don't the Assembly in Cardiff recognise it? Because the thing is, Wales comes up as far as Merthyr, there's a great big hole, and it starts again in Wrexham.
Well,
It's been for years.
this is going to feed into a question I was going to throw to the meeting about Brexit. And what we might be able to do post-Brexit. I appreciate there's probably a diverse range of views in this room here, there is. But the point that you make there about stopping at Merthyr is a well-recited view that is taken time and time again, it is then. But what we do have the opportunity coming out of Europe, and I live in the Vale of Glamorgan, Barry, the largest town in Wales, which would have deprivation as hard and as high as any area you'd find in the valleys, but by quirk of the way they drew the lines back in 1999 or whatever, doesn't receive a penny in European money because when they were drawing the lines, like Powys, it was excluded from any European funds other than some small regeneration pots of money. Now here's an opportunity with Brexit coming down the line that we can devise initiatives that actually support the whole of the United Kingdom and the whole of Wales, rather than just say we've got to stick to European lines, such as at the moment with Objective 1 and convergence funding, it sticks in the valleys, West Wales and North East Wales. Areas that need money for regeneration because they've had industrial decline, but I would suggest to you that Mid Wales has a stronger case as any other area of Wales to have some of that regeneration money. It goes back to this point about creating opportunities to keep young people in the area, and training, vocational training in particular around apprenticeships, is one of the key things that we've got to establish. I mean, you've got so many opportunities that with the right balance of policy and money, you could create huge opportunities here for apprenticeships. But the direction of education over the years has been to try and increase the numbers of people going to university, for example. Everyone needs a degree. I'm not someone who's got a degree. I left school at 16, so I'm not speaking as someone who went to university and had a free education. But to me, when I'm speaking to colleagues now and I'm speaking to people in trades, they're earning far more money than people who've got degrees. Because basically a lot of people have been sold a poor package. They've gone to the university, got the debt, and ultimately found there's no job at the end of it. And what we've got to start with is good skills advice in schools and careers advice in schools. And rather than boxing people up and just saying, well, that's 20 going here, 15 going there, actually meet the needs of what the economy requires. And vocational training is one of the big areas that's been neglected over the last 5 to 10 years, I would suggest. Well, Tony Blair set the target back in the early noughties that he wanted 50% of school leavers going to university. We never hit that target in Wales. I think it was about 35% of people went to university. And I'm as proud as anyone who goes, of people who go to university. I mean, my daughter was the first person to graduate from Aberystwyth University or any university in our family. I mean, you know, we're farmers by background. We never really put robes on as such. And I never thought I'd be putting a tie on each morning, to be honest. When I wake up, I'd be standing under cows the best part of the first 20 years of my working life. But to me, it's striking that balance and giving that opportunity. And if we've got to invest in our careers advice in schools so that when people are making their choices at 14 and 15, those choices are based on what those youngsters want to do and what the economy requires. So is it a recent phenomena that the college here has lost capacity, shall we say, and hence that's why students are having to go to Shrewsbury? And so that is something we can bring back to Newtown with the right investment. And there's the bill. Kito Bebb, the Minister of State at the Welsh office, is in Powys next Thursday, visiting Powys Council he is then, and these are the type of things that obviously need to be put forward as a matter of urgency at this early stage of this announcement, so that hopefully they can bed down, and that can actually be one of the asks, because the way the City Deal concept works is identifying half a dozen or so key projects that ultimately can have funding over a 10, 15, 20-year period. Because as we know, training isn't something you switch on and switch off overnight. It's something you've got to build the capacity and build the capability over time. I mean, you've got to get the lecturers, you've got to get the teachers in place as well as that impartial advice at the school, informing what is on offer and what are the best opportunities. And I'm sure Russ will be having that discussion, and I dare say it's a piece of work the committee might well be looking at sometime in the future as well. Then I think in a nutshell you summed that up in that the thinking, the strategic thinking in Welsh Government, if you like, in the civil service, has always been an east-west, west-east sort of mentality, not north-south, south-north, whichever way you want to look at it. Now, it is a fact that historically and traditionally our trading links have always been east-west, they have then. But actually, if you do want to build a more joined-up Wales and more opportunities here in Wales, you've actually got to look north-south as well then you have. And there has been opportunities to do that, and the demise of the old WDA was one of the most troubling aspects, I would say, of devolution, that took one of the best planks we had for economic development, because you actually had business leaders running the WDA. Yes, it had its faults, all organisations have its faults, but you actually had something outside of government which was there specifically to develop opportunities for businesses here in Wales. And it wasn't my take on it, but it was independent analysis that brand was worth £100 million. It was then. And £100 million of brand marketing was written away by Roger Morgan in 2006 when he threw it out. I mean, anyone who would have flown over the years would have seen the WDA logo on planes, and as you came into Heathrow and everything, it's a bit like Coca-Cola just crunching all their advertising and just saying, oh, we're not going to do this anymore. So that east-west mentality has been a hindrance to mid-Wales. Well, again, it builds on this narrative of using what we got, and this room has indicated that precious few have had the opportunity to use the rural development plan, and also with the Mid Wales growth deal, as it's starting its embryonic stage now to move forward, to get those asks in at this early stage before it gets gerrymandered, and actually what this area needs isn't even considered anymore, it isn't then. And as I said, I know Russ will be battling hard on that as well as Glyn, because the great thing what we've got now, we've got Chris and Glyn as MPs in Westminster, and then we've got Russ as the Assembly member here in Montgomeryshire as well then we have. But is there any views in the room around the Brexit discussions and negotiations? Because everyone seems to have a view on that, they do, and that really does put the cat amongst the pigeons, that does.
What's happening to us as a Conservative government at the moment, Andrew? Because I think there's a mess at things at the moment, isn't it? A big mess.
Something's rotten in the state.
A lot of the electing, isn't it? Yeah.
Well,
we're going weak as a government. So what's happening to things?
I think it faces, all governments face trying times, they do then. I mean, to my line of thinking, you know, you get elected on a party ticket. That might be a Labour ticket, it might be a Conservative ticket, it might be a Liberal ticket, it might be Plaid Cymru, it might be an independent ticket. And if you have a disagreement or you're uneasy with a situation, instead of actually going to the press and talking about it, have that conversation with your colleagues, let your view be known, but put your shoulder to the wheel and get behind what the party is trying to do and what the Prime Minister of the day is trying to do, which is enact the wishes of the British people. Now, we can argue whether Remain had a good campaign or the Brexiteers had a good campaign, but there is an instruction to the government of the day to get on with the job, there is then. And that job needs to be undertaken, and it needs to be undertaken in the national interest. And I don't think it does anyone any service, whether you're a Remain or a Brexiteer, to actually be trying to drive a bigger wedge through these negotiations and support the other side. I just don't think, this is the national interest, this is.
On a more personal basis, you voted for Brexit. I remember that well.
I do as well.
So what do you think about it? What is your personal view about it now?
I think there's huge opportunities there for us. But what we've got to do is grasp those opportunities. And I believe the Prime Minister has put offers on the table 2-3 times in succession now to the European Union, and the European Union have kicked sand in our faces. It has. No one wants to cause issues or problems here that will have a bitter legacy through these negotiations. But of course, from the European point of view, they are viewing it that there's 27 members of the European Union, and they want to make life difficult because they don't want to show that you can succeed outside of Europe. Now, I don't want to put Europe down, and I don't want to put this country down. I happen to think this is the greatest country in the world as such. It's the strongest union in the world, socially, politically and culturally. If you look at us, we're the 5th largest economy in the world. We have a great trading relationship with Europe. They trade £80 billion worth of goods more with us than we trade with them. So that's the first priority I would suggest that Europe should be trying to protect. 5 million jobs in Europe depend on trade with the United Kingdom. 1.5 million of those jobs are German jobs. There's the second thing that you would have thought they'd want to protect. Thirdly, it has never been the reason or policy of the UK government to do down Europe. Actually, every word that has been uttered is about building a special, long-lasting relationship with the continent of Europe, and this isn't about us turning our backs on Europe. It's not then. But what we do have is a referendum result that should be honoured. It's called democracy. I don't think that's that difficult. We had this discussion in the referendum. Let's get on with the job now and let's unlock those opportunities. Of course there'll be bumps in the way. Of course there'll be. Everything in life there's bumps in the way, there is then. But you navigate your way around that, and actually you go forward and succeed by grasping those opportunities that definitely lie the other side of this negotiating process. Sir, sorry.
But do you think that the European Union is going to be the same as they do in lots of things? It'll be at the last minute, it'll be the decisions. It won't be like 12 months before, it'll be at the last minute, and then they'll make a decision.
Well, funny enough, that point was raised in Bill Wells tonight. It was then, and yes, the history of the European Union is at the last minute. But I'm not. The longer this goes on, the less convinced I am that that is the case. Because as I go back to this point, there are 27 other member states who they want to obviously hold together, and quite rightly so. If that's the mission they want to do, great, let them do that. But ultimately, I do believe that there's a deal that we can secure and succeed in securing, but it will take pragmatism on both sides. And when you look at the position that we have taken over the last 6 to 8 months, and by we, I mean the UK government, the government has given ground on certain areas and been very firm on other areas. And there will come a point in the not too distant future where you will have to call it. And you'll have to say, well, you know, we can only go so far, and if there's not engagement from the other side, and it does seem as if large sections of the UK press are quite happy to corner Barnier and comment on Barnier saying this, saying that, well, in fact, what we have to do is make a decision. Is there a point in continuing this engagement? I believe that there's a point in continuing it because ultimately we want a successful agreement. But the other side has to come out and actually start showing, well, let's put it bluntly, showing a bit of leg.
Yeah. Andrew, how big?
I was just going to say, I think the politicians will take it to the wire, but at some point the bosses of Audi and BMW, all the industries, will say this has gone on long enough. We want a deal.
Yeah.
Politicians are playing politics.
Merkel's having problems as well at the moment.
Well, well, here's a question then. How many people in the room believe that we should... I'm not going to ask who are Remainers and who are Brexiters. I think we're all the same, to be honest with you. Now we've had that referendum. But how many people in the room believe that there should be a rerun of that referendum, irrespective of the way you voted? Exactly, and that's
Run our own country.
Well,
Run our own country.
That's the point that comes across time and time again to me. People who are Remainers saying, well, we had our chance, we voted, this is democracy at the end of the day, we've got to get on with it now. And I think the louder we can explain that message to, you know, the detractors in all this, that we are getting on with this job, the more positive. I mean, you asked the question about the UK government. The UK, who would you want around that negotiating? Jeremy Corbyn or Theresa May?
I think what's it going to cost?
They are making it hard for us. There's other countries pulling out as well.
Because we give away at the moment, it's going to cost us a fortune amount of the way they're going. And we've got a big deficit as it is.
Well,
we don't know how much it's going to
We don't, no.
I mean, the fixation on, obviously, the amount that's been paid does need to be reflected in. It was only a couple of months ago that Europe was saying it's £100 billion to come out of this. Then we have assets as well that they've got to pay us for. I mean, if you look at the European Bank of Reconstruction, they reckon the UK asset in that, or money back, is about £10 billion. Now, whether people agree or not with the transition deal, £20 billion or the £40 billion that's on the table is part of that transition deal, i.e. an extra 2 years for us to transition out. We would have to be making about £18 billion worth of payments anyway if we were staying in for another 2 years. Yeah. I get it that some people say they want a hard Brexit, but actually I go back to this point that surely success here will be measured on the way we trade in the future and the relationship we build with our neighbours and our international neighbours across the Atlantic and across the globe. And I don't want to see a situation that puts Britain into an isolated position unnecessarily. It's a mix of both the solutions you said. I mean, those who were doing what was being done prior to the referendum are continuing with much of the work that they were doing prior to that referendum. But obviously, the civil service has been beefed up, especially to deal with the Brexit negotiations. I mean, one of the first things the government did, obviously, in the change of Prime Minister, was reconfigure itself to deal with these negotiations. The creation of the Brexit Department, for example, the creation of the International Trade Department under Liam Fox, a revamping of the Foreign Office. And so the government was reorientated, obviously, to deal with the negotiations, and that reorientation has stayed in place even though we've had a general election in June of this year. One thing that drives me mad, if you like, looking at what's going on in Cardiff Bay, is the almost denial that exists in the governing party in Cardiff Bay and other parties about what is going to be coming down the road at us in about 18 months' time as such. And there is this strong belief that if they can weather it and actually keep the negative stories going, they will get a rerun of the referendum. They will. And that's the position. But I think people need to be conscious of that, because it's easy almost to think that the job is done. The job is not done, and there is a lot more work to do. And that work means unlocking the huge opportunities that are before us, rather than falling back and almost leaving the battlefield almost. And so from the government point of view in Westminster, I see the reorientation that's gone on, the way the departments are being reconstructed. From Cardiff Bay, I see little or no realisation about the dynamics of what we'll be looking at in 18 months, 2 years' time. And that's a real concern for Welsh domestic policy when there are so many opportunities for us to unlock.
In Parliament at the moment, and the concern is really is awful. I
It's
mean,
undermining
really bad.
the whole
It's
process.
undermining it. We have when
bickering.
the pressure isn't there. They're not collective enough. They haven't joined.
Well, what I will say, as Russ will back me up on this, they should learn maybe a bit from the Welsh Conservatives.
Oh, sure they
Because
will.
we had the referendum in 2016, the group split, about 50-50. But we didn't have the fight, we didn't have the rancour, we respected each other's decisions, and when the referendum was complete, we came together. We came together at the end of the day, and actually we realised what our job was. And our job is to represent the constituents who've trusted us to go forward and speak on their behalf. And I go back to this point time and time again. It is vital that people remember the role that they're there. They're there to give a voice to people who haven't got a voice. They're there to implement conservative policies, and above all, they're there to improve the lot of the people of Wales and the United Kingdom. Not for personal grandstanding in column inches in the paper, which does no one any good at all.
Assuming a Brexit is negotiated, it then has to be ratified by 27 member nations. What do you think is the risk that there'll be one maverick nation that will refuse to ratify and the whole thing falls apart before the end of March 2019?
Well, life's a risk, isn't it, at the end of the day? I mean, you paint the picture of the hoops, the loops, and everything else people have got to go through to get to March 2019. That's why, you need strong leadership, you do. Obviously, the uncertainty in Germany now that has been kicked up by the potential for a second election. I mean, I throw this back in some people's minds. Even if they do go for another election in Germany, for example, say that election is mid-January, could be even late January, by the nature of the German constitution, there would still be another 2 months of negotiations the other side of that to form a government. So you're looking at most probably April before you get a government in Germany. People are speculating that Merkel will not be the candidate for the CDU to go forward and fight that election. I don't know. I don't know enough about German politics, only what I've read this week. It is a fair assumption to say that obviously Merkel has been a very stabilising factor because of her, the amount of time she's been Chancellor in Germany. And so there are unknowns out there that we can't control. But what we need to focus on is what we can control. And what we can control is making sure that our negotiators, such as David Davies and the rest of the team, engage, do what they need to do within reason, so that Britain isn't portrayed as this awkward squad just deliberately aggravating for trouble, because that's what this country is not about. This country's been a pillar of stability for decades, if not centuries, and the amount of times we've gone into Europe and bailed them out over the years is something this country doesn't do. And I just think that all we should be focusing on is what we can control, what we need to put on the table, and it'll be for Germany and the other European powers to bring forward their own policy positions and solutions. But there is a deal to be done, but you need two people to work at that deal you do then. And I don't believe that one side of the deal is trying to push for a deal at the moment. Russ, sir.
We know that in Powys, for the last 10 years, Powys County Council has had the biggest cut from Welsh Government and local funding government every year, or the joint notice every single year. So every year they get the biggest cut of any local council in Wales. So we get a cut, Cardiff Council gets an increase. We also know that in May we had an amazing result in Powys. We got 20 Powys County Councillors. That's an amazing result that we'd never expected a few years ago. In Montgomeryshire, only half the county councillors are now Conservative county councillors. We could never even imagine that 10 years ago. So, I was thinking tonight, we've got Les as a county councillor, we've got Diane is a county councillor, Gary's been a county councillor, Dan and Mark behind me, county councillors. All of them new, apart from Gary, who's been here since the beginning of time. Most of them are elected in May. So there's an administration on the council now, Conservative Independent Administration. So what's your message to those county councillors? Because they've got to deal with this big bad cut the Welsh Government every single year, and at the same time they're responsible for running services. So what's your message to them? 'Cause I feel a bit sorry for them.
We've got a great opportunity in running Powys County Council, and rather than look at it as a milestone, look at it as an opportunity. But when Welsh Government are cutting your budget year on year, that makes it more of a challenge. Now, only in yesterday's budget, the Chancellor announced an extra £1.2 billion for Wales over the next 3 years, I think it is, 3 or 4 years. That's serious sums of money, that is. I'm a huge believer in making sure we invest in our health service. As someone who owes my wife's life and my kid's life to the NHS, you know, I will not spare a quarter in defending the National Health Service in any part of Wales. But the reality, what you're faced here, especially in local government, is because local government can raise its precept and raise an element of its own money via council tax, every time the health service puts its hand out for money, and at the moment, for example, Betsy Cadwallader in the north of Wales, where the government has been running it for 2.5 years directly, has a £50 million overspend. You have Howell Dda on similar terms for £50 million there. Abertawe Bro Morgannwg in Swansea is about 25 to £30 million. Cardiff and Vale is similar, 30 to £35 million. If you were a local authority, you'd be put into special measures if you were running those sort of debts, you would be then. And so what's important is that the Welsh Labour government get a grip on how the health service is run here in Wales, so that the money going in achieves what we require, which is lower waiting lists and better treatment times. At the moment, 1 in 7 people are on a waiting list here in Wales, they are, as opposed to 1 in 14 in England, and people are waiting longer and longer. But yet local government year on year is taking the hit because ministers in Cardiff know that you as local representatives are getting pushed back all the time to say raise 4%, raise 5% on the local council tax. And it's about explaining to people that the reason why local council tax is going up time and time again, gone up over 170% here in Wales since 1997, is because of the mismanagement of Labour in Cardiff. And in particular, when it comes to Powys, there is no reflection in the local government grant system that reflects on the delivery of rural services. Everything is population based, so hence Cardiff gets a good a reasonable settlement, shall we say, and always sees an increase because the population of Cardiff's going up. Sadly, demographically, and this goes in virtually full circle to what we were talking to earlier about the job opportunities or lack of and young people staying in mid Wales, the population of Powys is contracting, and so the money coming into Powys via the grant system is obviously getting less, but the cost of those services isn't getting any cheaper, it's not then. And so I would suggest 3 forms of attack. One would certainly be around the extra money the Chancellor has made available in the current budget of £1.2 billion over the next 3 years. 2, actually start spending money wisely here in Wales and get a handle on it so that one service isn't bled dry at the expense of another service. And thirdly, above all, there needs to be rural proofing of services so that money is made available for rural authorities like Powys, so that it is reflective of the extra money that is required to deliver a service in Rhyadr or Newtown here or Welshpool, because in Cardiff, for example, there's a surgery around the corner if you can't get into that particular surgery. There is a facility that you can find just in the next door street that you can find relatively easily to replace the one that might be lost in your part of Cardiff. But in mid Wales, that ain't the case. You end up having to travel 10, 15, 20 miles.
53 miles to Telford from here.
Telford. Well, in England, there is rural proofing of services where extra money is made available to local authorities. So those would be the 3 lines that I would be pushing back on, and making sure that people do know that it isn't Powys Council that should always be held to account. Yes, of course they should be held to account, but by and large, the problems emanate from Cardiff.
Good evening, welcome to BBC News. Stage 1 is done. Next stop, the beginning of talks about the UK's future relationship with the European Union, including trade. After through-the-night negotiations, a deal was struck first thing this morning between the UK and the EU on key areas, including the Irish border and the so-called divorce bill, which Downing Street says will amount to between £35 and £39 billion. Now the UK can, at last, move on to the next stage of talks. But the head of the European Council sounded a warning. So much time has been devoted to the easier part of the negotiations, he said, Now comes the hard part.